hope is we can get this restored in short order, because again, it saved us more than $1 billion for local governments and state government. That led to property taxes going down for the first time in 12 years on a median valued home. And unlike other states, we took a $3.6 billion deficit and turned it into a surplus, so much so the last 2 years we put money aside in the rainy day fund for the first time ever. Those are all great things, and they're not only good for our fiscal straight, they're good ultimately for the economy.
A wild week in Wisconsin politics. We'll try to make some sense of it this morning on For the Record. Good morning. My name is Brennan Nardi, filling in for Neil Heinen. After winning his recall election back in June, Governor Scott Walker promised to move Wisconsin forward. But instead, a Dane County Circuit Court judge is rolling back his collective bargaining law. Elsewhere, new polls released this past week show U.S. Senate candidates Tammy Baldwin and Tommy Thompson trading places, while the same numbers show the Obama-Biden ticket taking the lead over Mitt Romney and Wisconsin's own Paul Ryan. And that was before Ryan called his running mate, quote, obviously inarticulate, unquote. Here to help us figure out what all this means, the Progressive's political editor Ruth Conniff, President and CEO of the Wisconsin Grocers Association, Brandon Scholes, and state government reporter from the Wisconsin State Journal, Mary Spicuzza. Welcome to For the Record. So other than the iPhone 5 going on sale today, I think we have a lot to talk about. Thanks for being here. So Mary, I want to ask you to sort of set the stage for us a little bit with Act 10. Where are we this week?
Well, a lot's been going on with Act 10. So obviously, Governor Walker's been very critical of the judge's decision. He called him a liberal activist judge and said that this was a political decision. That's been heavily criticized by the teacher's attorney, who said he shouldn't be trying to undermine confidence in the judicial branch, and he should let this roll out in the courts. Attorney General Van Hollen has asked for a stay. Basically, he doesn't want any school districts, any local government to take action while this law is kind of up in the air. We're waiting to hear from the judge about whether that stay is going to be granted. And meanwhile, Dane County just approved new labor contracts. I believe it was late in the week. So.
And an article published in the State Journal, penned by you, talked about a petition.
Right. Oh, yes. So Governor Walker's campaign yesterday announced that they were launching a petition, basically asking for supporters to come forward and sign a petition saying that they support Act 10 and its changes. They said that that's not going to be used for any legal manner, but they do want people to come out and say that they support Governor Walker's changes.
What's going on there, Brandon?
Well, you know, I think the governor obviously wants to generate support for it and keep the passion of those people that supported what happened in the budget alive, because if it goes back to the legislature, they're going to have to deal with it again. But I find it ironic, the comments that, you know, we should, leave the courts alone. You know, President Obama made a great point about the Supreme Court should not mess up what Congress and the people did with health care and just let it alone. But in this circumstance, you know, they're suggesting it's right for the court to overturn this. This has to play out legally, and that's where it should be settled, and it most likely will be settled, because we don't need things like a Moody's report showing, you know, our state's fiscal position being in jeopardy. Clearly, overturning Act 10 would just wreak havoc amongst municipalities and school districts in the state. So we need to get this done quickly through the courts and have it be settled.
Ruth, a petition sounds a little bit like another petition.
Right. Well, I mean, it's really striking, I think, how political the response to this judge's decision has been, because, and also Mary's article noted that Colin Werwey, the governor's spokesperson, suggested that people from outside the state are welcome to sign this petition. It has no legal effect. It is purely a political move. So, you know, getting a whole bunch of names of people on paper saying they don't like what the judge said doesn't mean anything, except that the governor's trying to bolster his political position. So that's one thing. Secondly, the overturn of Act 10 is the law now. You know, they are hoping to appeal this and to have it reversed. But for now, this judge found in this really striking decision that it is unconstitutional. And there were a number of reasons for that. One is that the governor very politically, again, separated police and fire unions from other public employee unions for disparate treatment. His political allies don't have to operate under this really stringent set of requirements that pretty much prevent them from having a union and collectively bargaining over their pay and benefits. But his political enemies, the teachers union, are hit really hard. So that's one thing. I mean, that's a serious constitutional issue. And then the other is just what a high bar it is for people in the workplace either to vote to certify their union, to have a union. You have to count the votes. You have to count the heads of people who don't even bother to vote in the election when you look at getting a majority. These are deliberately high bars to prevent people from being able to have unions, to organize in the workplace. And it's a basic First Amendment issue. What the judge found is that it's a violation of people's free speech rights and their right to assemble. And then finally, the governor makes this economic argument that somehow we're in a better economic position because of Act 10. Don't forget, public employees had made all the wage and benefit concessions that the governor was seeking before he did away with their collective bargaining rights. This is an issue of whether people have the right to come to the table and talk to their boss about what they should be paid. It's not an issue about the dollar amount. So that's, I think, a really important one.
Does it create kind of a patchwork here now? You've got Dane County Board approving a new contract last night. You've got, obviously, the Madison Teachers Union gonna see some movement there. From the outside looking in, what is the voter, and we're in an election season, supposed to do with all of this? How are we supposed to unpack it?
Well, I think they're confused. I take that back. I think a lot of people don't understand what the ruling, this judge, what the impact of it. I mean, I think it's complicated so that folks on the street really don't know. All they know is that a liberal judge in Madison had another crazy ruling, and now we're going to go to court and see it. But it's true.
But Judge Margolis, who's a very respected judge, and has never been accused of being a liberal crazy, except by Scott Walker in the last week.
You have yours, and the other side has theirs. But what he did is he created confusion in what was a relatively stable situation. And there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with his ruling, and they're going to actually say he's created another hurdle and he's created another class. So as much as we want to kick this around and debate the economic impact of the state, because clearly there will be if it's overturned. Again, this is something that should be settled quickly, stay the order, settled quickly, run it through the appellate court, Supreme Court if necessary, and make the decision stand the way it is. Because if it is thrown out, you will see economic chaos in this state, and you will not go back to just some polite discussion about at the bargaining table. It will be vicious.
Did you just endorse the idea of letting the decision stay the way it is?
No, I said a stay of the decision.
Oh, a stay of the decision. Okay.
No, I wouldn't go there if I were you.
This is news this morning.
At the same time, I think these are really important constitutional issues that raise a lot of questions about free speech, about equal protection. And I think a lot of experts that I talked to this week, I said, were you surprised that this decision came out? A lot of us you lose track of how many court cases there are and how long this has been going on. And I mean, this fight's been going on since February 2011. At the same time, I think a lot of people predict this fight is going to go on for a long time. And there are going to be court judges who feel differently than each other, and not everybody is going to have the same interpretation of the Constitution. Who knows? This fight could go on Governor Walker's entire 4 years in office, for all we know.
And let's not forget that it was Governor Walker who created what I would describe as not a stable situation, as Brandon says, but just an incredible upheaval, an incredibly divisive environment in our state. Really took it to school teachers who were suddenly public enemy number one. That had not been the case in the past. And I think, to say that somehow, we've disempowered unions and now let's move forward, that's all in the past, is not accurate. I mean, this is a fundamental issue about whether or not people have the right as employees to get together and bargain. And, it should be decided in the courts, and it should be looked at really carefully in terms of whether it's constitutional to say that a governor can just whip out collective bargaining rights from all public employees in our state. I mean, that was historic.
We'll come back to this, I think, on education when we get into the presidential a little bit. We'll be right back with more For the Record.
What the American public is learning is that those same powerful, special, moneyed interests in Washington who want to write their own rules are also spending limitless dollars on television to try to elect their own senators. And that should be scary to all of us.
Polls, and more polls this week. So the Marquette Law School poll 50 to 41 for Baldwin, with independents moving the most. Last night, an NBC News Wall Street Journal Marist poll showed Baldwin ahead 48 to 46 among likely voters and 49 to 44 among registered voters. Ruth, what does this look like here?
Big week for Tammy Baldwin. It's a total reversal. I mean, these polls have taken Tommy Thompson's position, which was, and the New York Times poll as well, the Quinnipiac poll, there was a 6-point reversal, right? He lost his 6-point lead. She's pulled ahead by various margins, depending on which polls you look at. But it's a big shock, I think, because let's face it, Tommy Thompson has name recognition somewhere around the level of Miller beer in Wisconsin, right? So he is a very tough opponent for anybody, let alone a congresswoman from a particular congressional district here in Madison, who's not necessarily got the same statewide name recognition. I think Tammy has been underestimated. I think she's run a really good campaign. She's a great organizer, great fundraiser, and she's been on the air with ads. Tommy ran out of money after that really contentious primary he was in. So we're going to see a lot of money come into our state. We're going to see Karl Rove's organization, Crossroads GPS, just put $961,000 into a single week of anti-Baldwin ads. It's going to be a bonanza for local broadcast. But I think it's interesting to see Tammy move up, and I think she has painted Tommy in a light that is really hard for him, because she has said this is not the Tommy Thompson of the 1990s. This is a guy who went to Washington. He's a poster child for the revolving door. He wrote the part of Medicare Part D that was a sweetheart deal for the drug companies, made the federal government unable to bargain for good prices from the drug companies, and he's been lobbying for the healthcare industry ever since. So he is sort of right there in that Thurston Howell zone with Mitt Romney, and I think Mitt Romney's not doing him any good.
So Brandon, you told Politico anybody who thought Tammy was going to be easy to beat, is wrong.
Well, sure. I don't think that's a surprise, and I think to some extent some people could underestimate Tammy Baldwin. But when you look at the fact, and I thought her clip was in the front was pretty funny, where she's talking about outside money coming in. She's raised $3.5 million. She's raised more money than, and she's not done. I mean, she will continue to raise millions of dollars from the special interest groups around the country who want to see her in office. So you really have to just dismiss her comment. But she has spent the last couple of weeks just stripping the bark off Tommy Thompson, because she knows people like Tommy. She knows that they respected what he did as governor, and so they want to paint him into something that he's not. And the polls show that. I think that that's not a surprise. Anybody who is bombarded with millions of dollars of negative advertising is going to take a hit. And Ruth is right. Tommy, after that primary, didn't have the resources to do what he needed to do. That's changed. They're back up. So, you're going to see flips in polls. In this race, I can't believe we're not going to see another flip in the polls and another flip. But what will happen is, and you're seeing in some of them, they really show a very tight race. And I don't think that's a great surprise in this state that has shown that incumbents lose, that challengers come forward, or that candidates go back up and down in these polls. That's not a surprise in Wisconsin. So as you look forward to this race, Tommy Thompson's obviously going to be out there talking about the difference between he and Tammy Baldwin. Tammy Baldwin is going to continue to attack Tommy Thompson. And again, if people underestimate her, I do think they're crazy. I've said that from the beginning. She's a very smart politician. She's very different than the public image of the very nice and all that kind of stuff. But from a Politico, she will hit you and hit you hard, and she's going to have to do that between now and the election.
She has
to
really know what
control
they're
that
doing.
election. Yeah, for sure. So, is it topsy-turvy? You bet it is. But then again, for the last year and a half, has politics been anything but topsy-turvy in Wisconsin?
Sure. Mary, what do you see out there in terms of is it going to tighten again?
It is. I think that the polls this week were very positive for Tammy. Obviously, I think a lot of people were caught off guard. Not that she was gaining the polls, but what we saw in the Marquette poll. They did say that they had oversampled Democrats slightly compared to their previous polls, but at the same time, there's one clip that just keeps replaying in my mind, that ad where it says it's Tommy saying we went to Washington to change Washington, and instead it changed us. And I've heard that just over and over and over again this week, and I feel like that is really kind of, Wisconsinites like to think of their politicians of, standing up for Wisconsin. We want Packers fans and Brewers fans, and I think that clip has hurt Tommy.
Well, when we come back, we'll climb the ladder to the presidential. We'll be right back on For the Record.
We do. We have the fight. And, you know, it is 100% of Americans is why we're fighting. And the 23 million Americans that are really troubled. And then the others that are worried about what their next, you know, paycheck is going to bring, or if it's even going to be there.
So more poll numbers. Marquette Law School poll showed 54-40 for Obama. The NBC Wall Street Journal Marist, 50-45 for Obama among likely voters in Wisconsin, 51-43 for registered. Then you've got the Gallup swing state poll, says the public trusts Obama more on Medicare. A lot going on there. Help us out, Brandon. How does Romney move on this?
Well, I think in a presidential election, when you have an incumbent president, you're always going to see that president have a few points advantage. So you go into that. So the challenger's got to eat away at some of that. That is always difficult. The president's got plenty of money. He's got plenty of outside money. Romney has been raising money. So he needs to spend some more time in Wisconsin pushing message. But that race, too, I think is going to be very close in Wisconsin. I don't think we're going to see Wisconsin as a blowout state for anybody. The president is, you know, finally back in Wisconsin yesterday, so they've got to continue to do that. They've got to continue to build their presence. And you know, for both campaigns, they weren't in Wisconsin before their conventions. So now you're going to see everybody, you know, Ann Romney was here, the president was here. You're going to see everybody here once a week till the end of the campaign, and they're going to look to push those numbers up.
Is it imperative for Romney to stump here with Ryan, or given the polling numbers, does he want to separate a little bit?
Oh, I think that's probably a clear advantage for Romney, where he can go one place and Ryan can go another. I think, you know, Paul's been here a number of times. You know, they're obviously going to bring him back. He is tougher in this state than anybody else, really. So you bring Mitt Romney in this state several times, and you bring Paul Ryan in several times, and I think that gives them an advantage. But the president's campaign can't just think, well, we're going to have one stop, and then we're going to bring the vice president in again, and maybe we'll bring the first lady in, and let it go at that. I mean, I think they have to spend an enormous amount of time here just to keep that few points that they have as a lead. They can't afford to have that chewed up.
Ruth, what do you think? Is the Ryan plan working?
I think it's just been a catastrophe, and I think that Brandon puts the best face on it that you possibly can, but this has been just a horrific week for the Romney campaign, and Republicans left and right are just in despair about what a terrible campaigner he turns out to be. It's one gaffe after another. Most recently, as Ann Romney was just trying to straighten out, writing off 47% of the American public as a bunch of leeches who are sucking off the federal government.
But you got gaffes come and gaffes go, and like I said earlier, the iPhone's for sale. You know,
Yeah.
Are we going to see that momentum?
When you see the vice chairman of the National Romney Campaign, Tim Pawlenty, quit to go work for the banking industry, you see a very strong message. When you see Mitt Romney down in all these battleground states and the 5-point lead Obama has here, this is not where they thought they would be at this point. And so I think it is a very tough thing. And I don't think it's doing a lot of good to send the Romneys out to talk about how they've heard about people who are struggling. Because every time they come out with those statements, you're reminded of the fact that A, they themselves have absolutely no idea what it's like to struggle, and B, he has shown this incredible contempt for people who get the earned income tax credit, are on college loans, 47% of the American public. I mean, I think it's really a pretty stunning situation that the Republicans find themselves in, and that's why Tommy Thompson has come out in public and said, it doesn't help you when the guy at the top of the ticket is really doing poorly. I mean, I think that a lot of people like Tommy are worried about the down ballot effect of this disastrous Romney campaign.
So Mary, the 47% in the press and the media, do you see it as a bigger deal than some of the others?
Well, most of these polls that we saw come out this week were actually conducted before that 47% video was first reported by Mother Jones. I believe that I broke that story Monday afternoon. So we'll see in the following polls, I think, how people respond to that. I do think that that has hurt the campaign. You had Paul Ryan say he was obviously inarticulate in those comments. I don't think Paul Ryan or anybody else wants to sound like they are writing off 47% of the population as lazy slackers who just want to suck off the government. And I don't think, Paul Ryan hasn't said, yeah, that's our message. He said, he was obviously inarticulate, and he's talked about takers and makers, but not with the contempt, I think, that the Romney campaign is now feeling backlash from.
Did Clint Eastwood do any long-term damage with his convention?
We were in the convention hall that night, and there were certainly people who were excited about his speech, but there was a lot of confusion and uncomfortable. Some people compared it to kind of the drunk uncle grabbing the microphone at a wedding and not knowing what he was going to say next. And I think that was, this was really the biggest night of Mitt Romney's political life, and to be upstaged by an empty chair or Clint Eastwood or anyone else, that's what everybody was talking about afterwards.
I want to give you a chance to jump in, Brandon, and I'm interested too on the issue of education. Ruth's written about it with the Chicago teacher strike and Obama having to play, there's this back and forth that he's playing with his own party. Is that a gaffe?
I don't think it's a shining moment for the Obama campaign to have their big guy, the mayor of Chicago, in this tussle with the union. It just goes to the fact that you're probably never ever going to make a teachers union happy, no matter what you have on the table to bargain with. And clearly the president walked away from it. Clearly, he walked away from it just like he did the recall election in this state. They had nothing to do except flyovers. But I think the Eastwood thing, other comments. You mentioned there's gaffes. You're going to get a gaffe a week here and there, and it's pundit punch bag stuff, because at the end of the campaign, that's not what people are going to make their decision on. They're going to make their decision on the economy, whether they're better off today or whether they could be better off in a couple of years. They're going to make their decision on who's a strong leader on foreign policy. They're going to make their decision on health care. They're going to make their decision on their families. Those are the bigger issues in this campaign. And while campaigns can be distracted by gaffes and other things, failing campaigns direct their campaign to respond to gaffes and things that are distractions. Good campaigns focus on their message, they focus on the core resources that they have, and they look forward to Election Day building a ground game, turning out their voters, making sure their message goes. So the smart campaigns, the ones who win, don't get distracted by gaffes. They deal with them, they have to respond to them, but they move on and they focus back on issues. I think that's what the Obama campaign has to do with a distraction like the teacher strike in Chicago. The Romney campaign has to do the same thing with what goes on in their campaigns, and they have to focus on message, because it's those bigger things that people will make their minds up come election day.
We're going to have to wrap it up. Right back on For the Record. Thanks for watching For the Record.